The belief is that enslaved people obeyed until violence forced Britain to intervene. Planters walk verandas, assuming obedience is natural, permanent, and economically rational. Clerks mark ledgers, while black labor continues moving without visible resistance. Guards rest muskets against walls because nothing appears to require immediate enforcement. The manager pauses because workers remain standing after orders are given. No one runs, no one attacks. They wait. An overseer repeats instructions and receives no movement in response. He checks his watch rather than raising his voice. Delay appears before confrontation. A messenger is sent to another estate to ask whether work has resumed there. The reply arrives folded and unopened for several minutes. The paper remains on a desk while silence stretches. This record comes from reports written during those pauses, not after violence began. Morning continues without bells, bringing coordinated labor into motion. Drivers stand with whips lowered because no infraction has technically occurred. They wait for an order that fits the situation. A plantation attorney reviews manumission clauses already discussed among enslaved congregations. He underlines passages, but does not strike them out. The document stays legally intact. Recognition occurs without announcement. A magistrate reads a petition presented calmly by black church leaders. He does not reject it. He requests time. The request for time becomes the first visible concession. The governor receives a summary noting widespread expectation of new labor conditions. The summary uses the word expectation rather than demand. No correction is issued. Clergy members are summoned because chapels have become administrative spaces. They arrive without soldiers accompanying them. That absence is noticed. A minister confirms that instructions circulated verbally, not through written rebellion orders. This removes a charge before it is filed. Documentation replaces suspicion. Colonial officials request copies of sermons already delivered weeks earlier. The sermons are produced intact. Nothing is edited. Officials read slowly because no treasonous language appears. The reading itself delays the enforcement authority. Enslaved workers continue refusing labor without breaking property or attacking guards. Plantation routines collapse through non-participation rather than violence. A council meeting is called without declaring emergency status. Attendance is full. Uniforms remain ceremonial. Minutes record confusion over applicable statutes rather than accusations of rebellion. The confusion is procedural. A militia captain requests clarification on whether force is legally authorized. No answer is returned that day. Restriction begins quietly. Passas are required for movement between estates for the first time. The passas must be written. Clerks are overwhelmed. Movement slows across the colony because paperwork cannot match the human scale. This is recorded as inefficiency, not resistance. Curfews are announced verbally, but not posted in writing. Enforcement becomes discretionary rather than absolute. A patrol turns back after encountering a group waiting calmly on a road. No law is cited. No arrest is made. Inspection replaces punishment. Houses are entered to search for weapons and papers. Officials find none. They inventory furniture instead. The absence of contraband becomes a documented problem. Governors exchange letters asking whether the expectation itself constitutes a conspiracy. No precedent is located. A senior official suggests reframing the issue as a misunderstanding. That suggestion is circulated without objection. Reinterpretation begins before suppression. Statements describe the situation as a misguided belief rather than an organized authority. This language enters official correspondence. Black leaders are summoned individually rather than collectively. Meetings are staggered. Time fragments. Time fragments coordination. Each meeting is polite. Each ends without resolution. Enforcement is delayed through civility. Meanwhile, labor remains halted without incident. Cane spoils in fields because schedules depend on collective movement. Plantation owners submit compensation requests preemptively. They cite losses not yet calculated. The Treasury acknowledges receipt without approval. A military detachment arrives days later than planned. They wait for written orders that specify engagement rules. No engagement rules arrive. Soldiers stand visible but inactive near chapels and mills. Their presence pressures without acting. This presence alters negotiations. Black representatives now speak through intermediaries, trained in legal language. Requests reference previous approvals rather than new demands. Officials respond by requesting additional documentation. Documentation multiplies. Depositions are taken from enslaved witnesses, describing expectations taught by missionaries. The depositions are sworn. They are not deceived. dismissed. Missionaries are questioned using the same transcripts. Answers align. No contradiction emerges. This consistency becomes a problem. Restriction escalates. Assemblies are limited to daylight hours for administrative review purposes. Night meetings become unauthorized without being outlawed. Guards are instructed to note names rather than intervene. Lists grow longer than capacity. A registrar requests additional clerks. Approval is delayed. Reinterpretation sharpens. Official language shifts from expectation to dangerous misunderstanding. No violence is cited. Circulars warn that leniency may encourage further refusal. The warning remains hypothetical. A decision is made to restore labor gradually. The plan requires selective enforcement. Institutionalization begins to form. Courts schedule hearings weeks ahead to establish authority. Calendars become enforcement tools. Charges are filed against individuals rather than the collective. This isolates leadership structures. Sentences are deferred, pending further review. Silence becomes policy. Black authority remains visible through continued refusal, coordinated without written orders. Inspections confirm compliance with every stated restriction. Officials note obedience to rules without resumption of labor. This compliance undermines the justification for force. A private letter suggests redefining refusal as sedition retroactively. The suggestion is marked for later discussion. Narrative framing accelerates. Reports sent to London emphasize disorder risk rather than documented conduct. Selective details are highlighted. Dates blur. Actions compress. Language detaches from observed behavior. This is the transition point. Institutions prepare to replace documented reality with administrative narrative. A final memorandum instructs that future records reference insurrection rather than negotiation. The instruction is internal. The paper is signed, filed, and circulated quietly. The memorandum reaches every colonial office with instructions to label events as an insurrection. Clerks reproduce phrasing without commentary. Each copy reinforces administrative framing. Black leaders are summoned under the pretense of routine verification. Questions focus on intentions rather than actions. Their answers are transcribed exactly. Official reports selectively quote these testimonies to imply planning rather than coordination. No violent acts are recorded. Courts convene to process individuals rather than the collective. Hearings are scheduled far apart to prevent mass gatherings. The spacing itself is enforcement. Letters to London describe widespread rebellion using calculated omissions. The omissions reframe procedural delays as defiance. Missionaries are referenced as witnesses to obedience, yet their words are edited. Context is stripped. Authority consolidates through documentation rather than visible action. Black enforcement of labor schedules is replaced by bureaucratic verification. A governor circulates orders to rename leaders as agitators. Titles shift without physical confrontation. Legitimacy transfers administratively. Legal review panels question treaties and agreements signed weeks prior. Deliberations lasted months. Each delay diminishes the practical effect. Black agency remains visible, but subordinated to procedural officials note compliance while reclassifying actions as rebellion. Colonial presses print announcements of suppressed uprisings. Events are described as violent, even though records show nonviolent resistance. The narrative weaponizes bureaucracy. Enforcement becomes indirect. Curfews, permits, and inspection forms replace guards and whips. Each check appears procedural, not punitive. Colonial administrators decide which testimonies to include in published reports. Consistency is less important than implication. Missionaries' depositions are selectively quoted to suggest chaos rather than order. Every word is a tool of inspections continue to confirm labor compliance. Reports note attendance, but amid voluntary participation. The memory of coordinated black authority is replaced with administrative each descriptor shifts perceived responsibility. Official correspondence with London highlights threat potential rather than documented refusals. Colonial governors argue for preventive policies. Orders for troop rotations emphasize visibility, not engagement. Military presence becomes performative rather than functional. Bureaucratic erasure accelerates. Registers are instructed to destroy copies of original petitions. Requests for preservation are ignored. Files vanish without a record. Maps marking collective movement are reclassified as confidential. Access is denied. Names of black leaders are removed from payrolls and legal records. Subsequent historians cannot trace authority structures easily. Institutional memory is reoriented. Colonial governors assign credit for restored labor to administrative policy rather than black enforcement. Language transforms reality into an abstract principle. Letters reference order maintained without detailing voluntary compliance. Each phrase removes human agency from visible history. Black Black authority persists in practice but is invisible on paper. Future inquiries encounter only sanitized procedures. Courts continue to process minor infractions under the guise of discipline. The cumulative effect appears as law enforcement rather than organized negotiation. Missionary reports are archived with omissions, and colonial communication networks prioritize phrasing that emphasizes fear over obedience. Officials draft messages highlighting potential threats rather than recorded coordination. The institutional narrative solidifies. Black labor continues within limited oversight. Participation appears coerced on paper but voluntary in practice. Letters of complaint are recorded but dismissed administratively. Silence becomes proof of control. Histories written decades later cite rebellion suppressed without acknowledging sustained nonviolent coordination. Original documentation exists but is segregated in archives. Every procedural choice ensures that visible authority is reframed as passive obedience. The power witnessed by contemporaries is erased from conventional understanding. Colonial agents continue daily oversight while emphasizing perceived instability in reports. This strategy delays scrutiny. Financial ledgers reflect losses mitigated by administrative action rather than actual compliance. Numerical records replace human action. Institutions repurpose existing enforcement structures for generalized control. Inspection, documentation, and verification replace active negotiation. The legacy of action becomes bureaucratic precedent. Subsequent officials adopt procedural frames without understanding the original events. Letters from London Express concern over insubordination without evidence of violent acts. Recommendations reinforced preventive policy, not engagement. Black leaders operate under watchful yet indirect authority. Their impact persists silently, unrecorded. Archives are sorted to prioritize executive summaries over detailed depositions. Narrative erasure becomes systematic. Legal frameworks shift terminology. Refusal becomes riot. Coordination becomes assembly. And obedience becomes compliance. Language itself enforces reinterpretation. Records prepared for historians omit critical references to structured nonviolent authority. Only fragments survive, leaving patterns to be inferred. Each surviving document is carefully contextualized to support the official narrative. Contradictions are minimized or footnoted without explanation. The appearance of order masks the reality of sustained, organized Black enforcement. Institutions controlled perception without requiring confrontation. Military detachments remain stationed strategically, observed but unused. Presence alone signals power transferred to bureaucracy. Every administrative choice reinforces the impression that rebellion failed because Black authority never existed. The opposite is true on the ground. Colonial correspondence instructs that future references must frame the episode as exceptional and violent. Nonviolent coordination is removed from recorded history. Financial audits highlight losses due to disorder, not strategic refusal. Economic records rewrite action as disruption, not organized resistance. Missionary correspondence is selectively quoted to suggest instability rather than systemic agency. Individual voices are isolated. Procedural delays compound over months, creating historical distance. Each delay hides direct evidence of Black authority in action. Local courts adopt procedural templates emphasizing control rather than negotiation. Clerks reproduce these templates for decades. Institutions finalize reinterpretation through standardized language. The original sequence of recognition, documentation, restriction, and enforcement is reduced to generalized report. By the time final archives are compiled, visible power is entirely Historical memory is shaped through administrative choice, not human action. Black authority persists silently within communities. Official records obscure, reclassify, and minimize its existence. Every subsequent historian must navigate incomplete, reframed, and bureaucratically curated sources. The true mechanism of control is hidden, leaving only indirect traces. The documented consequences are administrative, not celebratory. Institutional authority, delay, and procedural choice dominate all visible outcomes. The final outcome in the records is order restored. Antigran's authority had never left the hands of those previously assumed to be powerless. No single act of rebellion appears decisive. Power is demonstrated continuously, yet erased continuously. The viewer is left observing institutions acting on partial truths. Every delayed order, repeated inspection, and altered report compounds the illusion of absolute control.